Today we're going to be assembling the Pimoroni Keybow, which is a mechanical keyboard powered by a Raspberry Pi 0WH, which means it's pretty overpowered for a keyboard, but it'll give us some interesting options once we have it together. First, we will do the requisite unboxing and parts knolling, because that's how we do. I didn't need to cut that. I opened it from the wrong side. So we have a number of keycaps and switches. The switches, or the keycaps, are translucent. We have the Raspberry Pi 0WH, a USB keyboard, because we don't already have enough USB cables, not keyboard. Little rubber feet, some acrylic plates which forms the platform, tiny screws and nuts and some standoffs, and finally some printed circuit boards. And now a lovely empty box. Let's take a look at all the pieces. We will sort everything out and get everything organized. So I like to separate all my components out relatively early in the build process. It's potentially more fun with Lego, but it's also good just to know where everything is and be able to get at it quickly. First order retrievability. And a few things I won't bother separating out, like the little rubber feet, but I will separate out the keycaps and switches. One of my least favorite parts when working with acrylic is the protective film. I have stubby fingers, and getting that film off is a pain, and you have to be pretty careful. This spacer acrylic is pretty thin. This one's beefier, so probably won't break. This one I have a good chance of breaking. Success and no breakage. One nice thing about these acrylic pieces is that there's protective film on only one side, so that at least is a bonus. Last but not least, the Raspberry Pi 0WH. The assembly directions that I've listed in both the show notes and the blog post are perfectly adequate to get everything running. There are a few notes and clarifications I will make here, but for the most part, everything is good. So we've already taken off the protective film. We will now add the rubber feet to the bottom. And the way it's shown on the website, you can't actually make out the logo. You'll see this little mark here. If you're looking at it from the bottom, the text should be facing up, so the word Keybow will be on your left, and that is the bottom. So the rubber feet just stick on like you would expect. Next up is putting the 0WH onto the base plate. And to do that, we'll flip over the base plate, and the Pi 0 is going to sit right here. And we're going to use 2 of the screws and 2 of the nuts to do that with. It is important that you use the front screws, the front mounting holes to do this. So we'll get both screws in, flip it over, and finger tighten it down. One thing when working with acrylic is you don't want to crank anything down too much because it will crack the acrylic. And I was actually unprepared. I did not have my little screwdriver handy, which is something you will always need just to get a little bit tighter fit. But again, we are not going to crank this down at all. Next, we're going to install the shim plate, and that's just going to go right here. And we need one of the standoffs and one of the screws. So we'll actually put the screw through first. And this we will hand tighten. Maybe. And the shim plate can actually only go on one way, and it'll be pretty obvious. And then take the last nut and put it on top. This is acting as a spacer only, because the printed circuit board that holds the keys, while it will be attached, will also rest on this screw. Next, we're going to attach the printed circuit board, and in order to do that, there are 3 brass threaded inserts here, and we will take off the plastic peel that is on each one of them. And put a threaded insert into each one of those, again finger tightening. And then we need to mate the 2 pieces together with the GPIO pins acting as the guide. And like with everything, it's just a gentle press fit. And there will be a small gap in the pins, that's fine. And you'll see here that nut is actually not acting as a spacer, but it'll keep everything together. And where those standoffs went, we will take the last few screws and attach the printed circuit board to the Pi base plate. So everything is connected up. What's left now is mounting the switches and the keycaps. And there is one important note to be made here. When we push in the keys, and this is not clear from the picture on the website, there is a gap on one end of the keys only. This gap right here. That needs to go towards the top. And if you look at the bottom of the key, you can see there are 2 pins there. And on the keyboard, printed circuit board, there's only one way these keys will be able to go in, and that is with the gap at the top. So the word Keybow on the keyboard printed circuit board will be in the upper right. On the gold leaf side that actually holds the keys, the word Keybow is on the lower right, and this cavity needs to be oriented towards the top of that board, so facing away from the word Keybow. And each of these presses in. It's a bit of a push, so it's probably a good idea to support all 4 sides when you make that final push. And we have 11 more to go. Once you've put all the keys in, it's a good idea to do a quick sanity check. Make sure that all those gaps are indeed facing the correct direction. Again, they should be towards the top of the board. So these little guys here should be away from the word Keybow at the bottom. And it's a good idea just to make sure that everything is set in all the way. And you may also want to check to make sure that none of the pins got bent. So if you do a quick check down the line of pins, it's easy to see whether or not any are bent and out of place. And this one is, so I will try to straighten that up. And this one is, and I will straighten that up. And that's looking pretty good. Next are the keycaps. And each of the keys has a little cross on it. Each of the keycaps has a little cross on the inside. They're symmetrical. It doesn't matter which way they go on. You just need to press all of those onto all the keys. I got the non-clicky keys. I don't like keyboards that make noise. Some people do. So 10 more of these. All that's left from the hardware side is to put these keys into the board. And again, you'll note there's 2 little diagonal holes at the bottom of each key location. Those are supposed to match up with the pins on the keyboard. And assuming no keys are bent, this presses in, so it's a friction fit connection. You might hear some strange noises when it goes in, but in theory it should be okay. Actually, something seems wrong here because it appears to be tilted. This side seems to be taller than this side, so I may have misunderstood the direction. So I will go back and check those, and if I have to, I will make a correction. Next up, we'll be looking at the software installation. It's a standard Raspberry Pi program, so SD card there is running a version of Linux, which is pretty interesting. So we will cover that next. So to put the Keybow OS onto our actual keyboard, we need to download a zip file and unzip it. So we'll download that and we'll put it on our desktop for now. It's a short download. We'll just open it up, and according to the directions, we just need to copy that onto the SD card. So inside the SD card, we need all of these files copied onto, and we'll do it the old-fashioned way. We'll cut and paste. Control-C, Control-V, or on Macintosh, Command-C, Command-V. Everything is on there. It is at the top level of the card, and that should be all we need to do. So what we need to do now is plug in the SD card to the Raspberry Pi, power on the Raspberry Pi. So it doesn't get much easier than that with the default configuration. And what it says here, 10 to 15 seconds, we should get blinky blinkies, and we'll make sure that works, and then we'll come back and look at mapping some keys and testing everything out. So we've put our Keybow OS onto a micro SD card, and we have our keyboard assembled and ready to go. We will put that in, and you'll notice there are two USB ports on the Keybow itself, well, on the Raspberry Pi, and we want to use the one that is underneath this cutout. It gives a little bit of a place for the plug to go. So I'm not yet plugging it into a computer. I'm just using a USB power cable, one step at a time, just to make sure that we're getting anything. So I will slide that in there, and what it said is after about 10 to 15 seconds we should start to see some blinky animations, some color fading. So in a couple seconds, in theory, we should start to see things happening, and indeed things are happening. We have some animations. So it looks like each of the keys is lighting up. Each of the keys is cycling through some colors. So our initial build, at least, is looking good. Next, we will try plugging this into a machine, and we will look at customizing the actual keys. So we'll set it up to do something actually useful instead of just making some blinky lights. Once we have our keyboard set up, all that's left to do is plug it in and give it a real-world test. Once it's plugged in, particularly the first time, you may get a pop-up warning saying that it cannot identify your keyboard. This is fine. You can either deal with that, like I did. We do see a little bit of lightage, and now the full boot sequence has happened. The only thing that's left is to figure out which keys are which. What is the orientation of the keyboard? So I've opened up a text document, and I will just try typing. So according to our default key map written in Lua, this is key 2, key 1, key 0. 3 is mapped to key 5, 4, 3. So then this will be 8, 7, 6, 11, 10, 9. So we appear to have a working keyboard set up by default as a numeric keypad. The only thing that's left now is to modify those keys to suit our own particular needs, and we will take a stab at that next.